We're rolling now, and yeah, Falko One in the graffiti street art game for more than 30 years now. OG, I suppose you could
Yeah,
say.
old grandpa, yes.
I mean, thanks so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I know your services are very much in demand.
Oh, yeah, thanks for asking me. I mean, it's always flattering to, get these requests from international grounds.
Well, yeah, and this is it's my first connection to Africa here with with the interview. So it's so thank you for cutting the ribbon on that one.
Thanks, man.
And I suppose I've got the virtual background here with one of your elephants, which is kind of how I really stumbled across your work in the first place. This one's from Brick Lane in London from a couple of years ago. But you're more than just elephants. You got such a diverse style. But would you say that's your trademark?
It's a funny journey that we've been through, and to answer the question is that even though I've been doing graffiti street art or whatever for 30 years, it's only been since 2014 or so since I've kind of found my identity with these elephants. So the elephants are now my identity. But then before that, from 1988, 89 until 2014, as an artist in South Africa, as a graffiti artist, you kind of have to be very diverse and paint everything. And, there wasn't much artist integrity per se, where you kind of just doing all bits and bobs. And in that method, it was a process of learning to paint everything from sign writing, logos to realism. And that on the one side, and pretty much we as a South African graffiti scene never really had an identity. So what we were just doing all the time was copying what was popular overseas, sitting with the magazines before the internet, of course. I mean, the internet, you just kind of mimicking more than anything else. And then through that also developed a bit of a general rapport for your approach to art as an art, as a graffiti artist. So that in my back pocket has always been there. And once I found the identity for the elephants, I kind of hammered it, because I was like, geez, it's been right in front of me for 24 years. And I really, 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 really enjoy it. It's been internationally accepted, or, it's got a lot of good criticism. Not a lot of bad criticism, which I find quite worrisome, because I mean, you need that, So yeah, so with going through the 1990s, it was pretty much your typical what's now known as hip hop graffiti. The painting trains and illegal and tags and bombing and whatever the case, and then also practicing the style and creating that identity, and fell away a bit. But with the site specific artworks, I've actually realized that I was doing it in the early 2000s already, but because the site specific artworks in real life did not translate outside of that environment, because there was no platforms for people to understand what it was. So even if you painted in a community and it was a character on a public phone booth, it wasn't really taken in. But I mean, since the dawn of social media platforms, it became kind of more of an avenue for me to focus on that as well, because I've had all these 10, 15 years of ideas that I'm now putting in the forefront.
What I find fascinating about, I mean, I'll keep talking about the elephants for now, is that you managed to shape shift them into that whatever location you find them, but the proportions are still right and everything. How did you kind of hone that, and how do you pick a site? Have you just got this kind of instinct for it now, and you just look at that and say, okay, that's going to be a boom box, yeah. The elephant's going to tuck in under that, or whatever.
Yeah, You know what my number one approach to all of these is that it mustn't be forced. If it doesn't fall from the sky, per se, me coming to a location, and if I don't see it immediately, I don't bother with it. I'd rather take a photograph of it, go home, just look at it in a month's time again, and make a plan to go back. So the first approach is just to always let it fall from the sky, because some of the greatest songs fell from the sky. If now in hindsight, when they speak to musicians and they're like, we were, I don't know what stories they are, but it's usually the greatest songs fell from the sky.
Yeah.
So I've taken that. Yeah, I've taken that approach, and I've become a bit superstitious about it, where I would doubt what I'm doing if I gave it too much thought. I would fear that what I'm doing would fail because I've tinkered with it too much, or I've sat a week kind of toiling through what it could be. So always the approach is to answer your question, rock up to the wall. If it doesn't strike me, I'd be like, let's move on. More often than not, I must say they do fall from the sky, because if you in that mindset, your mind's always kind of churning out little bits of ideas, and it's just for you to recognize it.
But does that come with, I mean, you've been spraying for like 30 odd years now. So does that come with the experience, that maybe that, in the early days, perhaps it might not have fallen from the sky, so to speak, but with now you've got that experience, you can just go, that's it.
That's an interesting question about the experience part, because I don't know these. I'm going to mention some names now, but I don't know these people personally, and I've just gotten glimpses of them on social media, or seeing like little profile pics, and a lot of like the good site specific artists or object inclusive artists are a bit more mature. They come from a graffiti background, and they used to do. So I think that plays an important part, is that you've done the foundation course, per se, for lack of a better term, where you were a graffiti artist and you spent the time on the street. So that aspect of it is not that overwhelming anymore. It doesn't play that big a role where to you being an artist, because especially like the up and coming ones and the younger ones, you can see with the posts and even in the conversations, it's a lot about like being on the street and keeping it real. But the older ones are like, okay, that's fine. Let's focus on our career as artists. And then like Odeus, I don't know how to say his name, but from what I've seen is that he's a bit more mature, and then there's one or two others that I'm like, I feel that that you've had to kind of chisel off the bad fat, per se, to get to hone yourself to become who you are today.
Yeah, and yeah, OD said, yeah, that kind of 3D work is just insane, isn't it?
Yeah, because if you look at the older stuff, especially, I feel it was, you could see you could see where it comes from, and you can see the do's and don'ts, and this is what I like. I like, I'm not really academically inclined, or but I like to sit and analyze artists and the progress and where they come from and who they are today, and you can see the work, and then they post something and it's a hit, and then you can see them delving in that direction, and I do that as well, because we all want to try and make lives easier for ourselves by being successful.
And do you think, because I feel that street art is in such a place now that it's pop or popular, like it's even being used like commercially, and let's say, for instance, in Manchester, if there's a new building going up, someone will commission a mural for it, for example. But do you feel like that foundation course, like you described it in graffiti, graffiti writing is really important to inform your work as a street artist, because some start in the street art and don't necessarily start with the graffiti writing?
Yes, I'm gonna side answer that to to other subcultures, culture slash subcultures that have also now gone from where it was quite traditional and contained. Contained meaning if you wanted to get into it, there was a process. There were people that had to acknowledge your existence. You know, you had to kind of earn your dues. And I mean, tattooing was one of those cultures once upon a time where you couldn't just set up shop and start tattooing, buy a machine off the internet, and you know, it was also where you had to get a little nod of approval and had to interact with the right people and you had to apprentice by the right person for 5 years for free. You know, it was that type of culture. And this is where we are now, a street art as well, as where the graffiti part is falling away and people are kind of just, with the use of technology, not needing to kind of build themselves because the tools exist that makes it easy, and you have to let it go. You know, you can't control it because the change is inevitable and the growth is inevitable, and with growth comes more people. You know, it would be silly to say that this is the biggest art form in the world, but there's only the small end of people doing it, because that's not what big means in its simplest form. Anyway, so I mean, what is happening now is that everything has been subgenre. So there's still writing people that have committed to still being like, you know, style writers, and this character character painters, and that's now subdivided into taggers and people that just to throw up. And so yes, it's good, you know. And from this, we don't know what it is. In the future, we'll look back and say, oh, this was the beginning of something better, you know, and we would be responsible for, you know, its birth.
And forgive me, I'm not, you know, hugely informed on, I suppose, you know, I'm kind of thinking back to the, let's say, the early days when you started in Cape Town. Like, what was, you know, was there a scene? Where would you spray? How would you find places? You know, much as you can say.
I'm gonna say that we had a scene in the 90s, but a big but. And I have to be honest, and we have to be honest with ourselves here in South Africa, is that we actually didn't know what we were doing. You know, it was a case of somebody giving us a smart TV, but no remote. You know, it was just this solid piece of thing that we knew how to plug in,
right?
But the rest of it was a mystery to us. You know, so the scene was really small. I mean, in most of the 80s until about 94, 93, 94, there was like 5 of us painting. I mean, there were a lot more people calling themselves graffiti writers or graffiti artists, but they were just like sitting at home drawing on a page, and then they'll go to each other's houses and battle each other. The social aspect of that is quite important. The social and economic aspect of that's quite important because, again, we didn't understand what it was, what we were supposed to do. We didn't understand the philosophy of what writing your name was and make yourself famous. We were making it up. And then there was like the economic factor where, I mean, realistically, it's either buying paint or buying food or clothes, you know. Not that you were like poor or whatever the case, but it was economic decisions had to be made. From a political point of view as well, in our society in the 80s and early 90s, there was no such thing as hip hop graffiti per se, because it was so small. So graffiti could have been seen as an act of political terrorism. So people kind of veered away from that as well. And police didn't differentiate. They couldn't come to you and say, hey, what graffiti are you doing here? Are you doing hip-hop graffiti or political graffiti? To them, it was just one thing, you know? Right. So all these factors played a role. And I mean, it wasn't worth going to jail for doing graffiti. I mean, people always like, it must be hard. But in South Africa, to go to jail for graffiti, it's really dumb, especially in the 80s and 90s. It's, I mean, we had laws where you could be locked up indefinitely without a trial just for being suspected as being a political activist. So imagine going to jail for hip hop graffiti indefinitely, you know? So sensibly, people veered away from it, which I understand. And it wasn't because they weren't hard or they weren't real. It's just that it's not worth it,
Yeah.
you know? So, yeah, so the 90s changed a bit, and it definitely changed when we started getting access to international writers who started coming to South Africa because we were now, you know, under new government with new political a new political approach to running the country. So people started coming in. I mean, in the 90s, the first big set of writers that came was 97, 98. And it was Loom at Cantu, Escher, Darko, Mr. E from Australia. There was a guy called Seamso, very important. And they came. And in like 2-3 weeks, they hammered it. They did 20, 30 productions, painted 20 trains. They just hammered it, but it set up the scene, you know. But then also very important, which helped our scene, was a UK writer, Solo One. He came through in the mid 90s-ish, and he came with like a very advanced bombing approach, which we never knew of. And these are the kind of people that changed how we saw things, you know. And then we started traveling to Europe. The first time I went to Europe was in 1995, went to Sweden. And it was genuinely the first time I saw another person do graffiti, you know. And I didn't know about different caps, different systems, nothing. So coming back with that knowledge also changed, you know, how we looked at what we were doing. We didn't have an identity. That's a very important question I always got when traveling overseas, is that other graffiti artists wanted to know what a South African style was. We didn't have a style. I think we still don't have a style. And I think that is because it's too divided with the people that are doing it. You know, what the South African is a contention in itself, you know, because we are so many different races and languages and whatever the case. So I think we'll get there one day with what is a style. But as far as the 90s were concerned, it was a great time. We had a lot of fun. We learned. We thought we were we were keeping it real. We weren't, but we had fun.
And I suppose throughout all of this, hip hop's been seems to have been such a big influence as well, and still continues to be a big influence on your work as well. Would you say that's a fair point?
Okay, so the hip hop part of graffiti has it's undeniable the most important thing as to what got me here today. But I think in the last 5 years or so, I've kind of toned it down a bit. I think what's happening is that because I'm getting older, my hearing's changing, so the sounds. So what the abrasiveness, I think, it's too much for me to handle, you know, and that's natural. So I've toned it down a bit. I mean, I do listen to rap music still because my kids are now into it, and it's funny because when I speak to them about rap, I think it's a case of them thinking, "What do you know, old man?" Then I'm like, "Do you know this about this and this guy?" And they're like, "We don't care." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then I realized again with rap music, it's not where it was us as a scene, as a subculture, kind of into it and knowing all these facts about all these rappers, and to them it's just pop music, and they don't care about nothing else that's happening behind the scenes other than the song that's playing. And I had to learn that the hard way with him. So I still listen to it, and when they come and they say, "Oh, we like this rap song," and I say, "Hey, do you know who this guy's influence was?" Like my older son likes Eminem, so I said, Eminem likes Rakim. Play Rakim. My son's like, "What shit is this? It sounds so old." And I'm like, "You were disappointment, my man."
just play the odd song in there.
Yeah, so that's kind of my interaction with hip hop at the moment. And so like my youngest daughter's into hip hop dancing, so I got a little clip of me doing some windmills in the 90s, and I'm like, this is me, and she's like, that doesn't mean anything to me, so I think my interaction with hip hop now is just me trying to tell my kids that I wasn't once this old man.
Well, one thing I love as well, it was one of your recent site-specific pieces, which is it's like a pink elephant, and you've got the boombox, which is in I guess it's like a window, but then you've also got I think it's it's like a girl in a pink coat.
In a gown. It's a gown.
It's a guy, is it? Oh, sorry. But yeah. I love that photo. I love the piece, and I love the photo because it's someone it just like in sort of wonder at this piece. Does that kind of when you put something in a community, does that give you a kind of a bit of a buzz really when people accept it and enjoy the the artwork that you're putting there?
I very seldom come across any kind of resistance to what I do. But when I do get resistance, it's quite big. It's never really something small. I mean, it's like if the resistance comes, it's something solid, something that makes you feel jaded, where you're like, is this worth it, So that elephant that you did was it's in a black community, which is it's a place not far from here called Langa, and I used to go there quite a bit. And that building used to be like an old mining hostel, I think, and they are quite easy to get permission for, which is half the job, because they're quite dilapidated. So people generally don't mind the elephants, it's I think that is what is the godsend of it, for lack of a better term, is that I was sent this element to paint, and it's non-controversial, which I wish it was, but this is what I've got, and this is what I'm working with, and the people love it, I don't know what else to say about it, but yeah, it's generally accepted.
What
except I did some elephants in a little town just outside Cape Town last year, and got quite a bit of resistance because I did like a herd, and then some little baby elephants on the back, and somebody came in and said this looks sexual and it's obscene, and called the police, and the police came, and
oh my God,
quite a bit of riffraff, and yeah, there was racism attached to it, but I wasn't worried about the racism. I'm used to that. But the fact that he said the elephants look sexual, that I took offense to, because why would I? Anyway.
Man, sounds like it's a bit of a rough day, that.
Yeah. The good thing about being about like graffiti in general, and the ones who know what I'm talking about will know what I'm talking about, is that the good thing about like graffiti in its traditional sense, being on the street, is that you learn to deal with everybody, from the positive to the negative, and you take it in, and it becomes part of your graffiti persona, where any day can bring any situation, and you have to deal with it amicably, because at the end of the day you want to finish your artwork, so that's a good lesson in life through of being a graffiti artist.
And is that, I've just got to pick up on, I mean, you say, you just said racism is something you're used to. Is it, I mean,
it's it's not like, and I would like to say, and it's very much for the sake of clarity, it's not like all blasting all the time. It's not like humanity walk out the door and it's just, it's in certain places, in certain environment where it is to be expected, and painting in those areas, I am putting myself out there, and when it happens, and I'm like, okay, I was expecting it. Like I said, generally I get very, 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 very little resistance, and most people across all races and genders and age groups all kind of veer towards liking it, which I appreciate. But when it happens, it's quite like, there isn't a word for it, but it's
kind of deflating.
Yeah. Sorry?
Kind of deflating.
Yeah, man, because because the thing that I don't like about it is that I prefer to be straight on, man. Just come out and say, yo, this is it. But then to be that and disguise it as not liking the artwork. That's what I don't like. Don't insult the artwork. I worked hard. This artwork costs a lot of money. Don't insult the artwork. Rather deal with me straight on as a human being. And I would prefer it because at least you got the courage, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not good either way, but you know where you stand in if it's less insidious, so to speak. But that, I don't know. It just seems strange to say this out loud. Frankly, it sounds.
But at the end of the day, there is very little. There's very, 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 very little you can say to insult me. Like nothing. You can tell me anything. Nothing phases me. So I think that is my armor.
Right.
Is that I grew up quite tough, just being not a cool kid growing up, so kind of being berated all the time and people just giving you names and always insulting you. So as a kid, that I think built up the armors, and that is translated into now me saying there's nothing you can say where I would be like, oh well, let's move on.
Yeah, you've got a kind of toolkit, so to speak.
Yeah, I like it. I love it.
Yeah, and you have taken your art far and wide, and I mean, I suppose I was just watching there was a really nice documentary on YouTube. I think it's by Unstoppable, I think it was called, and it was about Once Upon a Town.
Yeah, Red Bull's the original. Red Bull produced it. Funded everything. The whole project was backed by Red Bull. I don't know what happened to why it's now on that channel, but yeah, it was, again, traveled the whole country, went to 20 different towns over 2 years. In the documentary, there's only 5 towns because we kind of had to see what made the best story, for the sake of television.
Yeah.
Again, experienced so much bad shit, but also so much good shit, And from the beginning, we set out to not make it a kind of expose on the negativity because it's too easy. It's too easy to punch below the belt. So we thought, okay, let's just keep it snazzy. Let's make something heartwarming, and that's what we set out to do.
Yeah, and you definitely achieved it. And I think there's quite a few things I love about it. I mean, the art's just beautiful, and these amazing site-specific works of all different, not just elephants. Every you've got everything there. But I think in putting something like so beautiful in like just a really small township, of maybe like 1,000 people. I think one of the places.
Yeah.
It almost makes it stand out that little bit more. Did you sort of feel that when you were? How did you pick the towns? Is that one of the, you wanted to go to some of the smaller places, or they kind of, you know, the less well-off places, for example?
The choosing of the places worked in two ways. Before I did that project, I did and still do drive around the country quite a bit. So, for example, if I drive from Cape Town to Johannesburg, it's never a direct drive. It would be, oh, here's a little sign that says no name town. Let's go have a look, you know. And since 2005, I've kind of been making mental notes of places that I've always wanted to go back to. So to get the project started, that was kind of what I did. But after 4 or 5, I ran out of good places to go. And then all I did was Google Earth. Satellite view, checked it out. Is there accommodation? Is there ATM? Is there a place to eat? Population, and that's it. If it's too big, you know, you move on, because it wouldn't have an effect, because the artworks will get lost. So it had to be small enough so that if you go in, it's the talk of the town. And fortunately, there's quite a lot of places like those in like no-name startup towns per se, you know, that's literally 1,000, even less. And yeah,
it's amazing that the kind of, you've got the mix of the super high tech and the super low tech, if you like, in bringing them together. But I think what I noticed really from that documentary as well was that you know, I suppose when you put something big and bright and colorful, it stands out a lot because of the, you know, a lot of the houses are kind of the same color. The landscape is quite, can be quite flat as well. So it sort of just jumps out, doesn't it? You know?
Yeah. And you know, there were towns where I would go, and it would be initially set out that I'd spend a week there. But after day 2, it would be like, you know, this isn't the right town. And instead of forcing it again, you know, I would leave, and I would rather try and set up shop somewhere else. A big part of it for me was always the people. If you come to a place and the people aren't hostile in any way, but the energy that they give off, you know, if you come in and you paint the first house, and an hour later there's 10 other people all saying, what about ours?
Right.
That's a town you stay in, you know, because your job is done. But if you go into a town and then, you know, politics, little micro politics come up, and you know, community leaders want to start getting involved, and you're like, okay, it's time to go. And again, it's people, you learn how to deal with the situation. But again, it worked out positively, because everything fell into place all the time. The towns we left weren't the right towns. The towns we stayed in were the right towns. Cinematically, they were the right towns. Everything fell into place. And it helps me stick to my belief that, you know, if it doesn't happen effortlessly, don't do it. For me, that is. I know there's people that like to work hard. I don't.
And was that would you say that that project was the one that sort of just took you up to the next level, so to speak, and, you know, propelled you to, you know, to sort of, I guess, where you are now, really?
Yeah. I would say it was actually a massive turning point. One day I just got a notification to say, like, Board Panda or something did an article on it, and before I knew it, for a week. And I know for a week in social media times, to get kind of attention is a long time, but for a week, every day, and I was on the road that time. That week it happened. I was busy doing the project. It was a distraction, because if you don't reply immediately within a certain time, you know, people move on. They think you're not interested. So I was trying to paint all these houses, and at the same time answering all these questions, and then trying to keep the hype going. Because for me, it was, you know, worth it from an acknowledgement point of view. And more importantly, Rebel was happy, because, you know, what we did fell on fertile soil. So yes, it did. And that is what made me delve a bit more into the elephants, because I was painting a lot of different things other than the elephants. But at the everything that was being done, the first article was done on the elephants, and it's so funny because it was there all the time, and it takes somebody in the right place at the right time to recognize it, and here we are.
What do you think it is about the elephant as a as an animal, as a species, I suppose, that kind of people just warm to?
I never had an answer for that until 2 years ago. 2 years ago was the first time I saw an elephant in real life, and we made a massive mission, the family, to go off and see them.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I was lost for words when I saw like a herd of like 30 elephants for the first time in the wild. And I still never had a explanation or a theory to why I'm attracted to doing them and what purpose they serve as an artwork. And only like in the last year or so, I've kind of developed some kind of explanation. But again, it's not something that I feel is the answer. I think I've got to give it another 10 years before hindsight will give me my answer, if that answers your question.
Ish.
I don't know other people like it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it would be like, why do people like Psycho Killer by Talking Heads? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I suppose one thing that strikes me, for example, like this elephant in the background here is blue, and there's a certain kind of melancholy to it. But then the other one, I suppose the color and the place and the setting. I suppose you're kind of evoking a certain mood, if you like, by the way where you paint them, the colors that you paint them in. You've got almost like a whole palette of elephants, if you like.
Yeah. So specifically that one behind you, it was my last trip to London, and that day in particular, it was hammering with rain. And in that little courtyard, funnily enough, there was some eviction taking place as well. They were the police with the bashing thing,
right.
And the guy that was taking me around, Trev, the police still came to us and like, hey, if you guys got permission and all that. But the main thing, it was hammering. It was hammering, and it was really grim. And I thought, let's paint something that would photographically translate into grim.
Nice.
Which is the blue somber, and there were black bags laying in front of it and little pieces of palette. And even his position's a bit it's stuck in, like it's not doing well because the space it's in. So all that just came to me in that moment, in desperation of trying to get out of the rain, because I was feeling really despondent. It was raining every day, and it can bring you down if you're not used to it.
Yeah. I can tell you now. I'm looking out of my window. It's raining now. It's raining now. Oh, no. It's grey. We've got like 50-mile-an-hour winds.
Everybody's walking it, and this was summer, and people were had on like t-shirts and like shorts and
yes. Mate, honestly, I've got shorts on now. I'm not gonna lie, but there are people that I don't get this. No matter the weather in this country, there will be people reliably in shorts. But what? This is not shorts weather. You're not getting it on. Yeah. It's not happening,
Yeah. I mean, anyway, without being a tourist about it, but I mean, being wet all the time, but so like, it's like being in a dungeon, but not in a dungeon.
How was that experience though, as a whole, like painting, painting in London? Because I mean, it's, I can't think of it. I mean, it's quite a contrast in terms of, location, the weather, like everything about it, and it's so busy and packed and bustling. How was the experience as a whole?
At home or in
London, like comparing that, the experience painting there to.
the first thing I was quite taken aback with is that, you know, here in South Africa in general, you don't really get to paint on, I don't know what you call it, but face brick houses, you know, because the face brick, especially where I'm from, there's a lot more esteem that goes into a house that's face brick.
Right. Yeah.
So you go to London and people are just painting on all the bricks, young and, you know, old, new. And I was like, are you sure we can paint here? Because, the value of face brick. And eventually I realized that that is what you have as surfaces. That was the first thing I kind of struggled with. What I do like about it is that we once had it, but it's gone now, is that the artworks are urban. It is where it's urban art in an urban area. Here, not so much because of graffiti bylaws or whatever the case. I liked it. I mean, on the day I painted all these works, I painted like 4 or 5 of them in one day, and there were all these street art tours, and I was like, and the street art tours were in different languages, and I was like, geez, this is quite an advanced kind of situation for what you're doing. Again, we had it, but it disappeared, and now they're trying to rebuild it again. I like it. I mean, it's real interesting. I went to paint in Ireland, the Northern Ireland, and I don't know what the gist of it was, but while I was painting, a lady came to give me £100 on the street to say thank you.
Okay.
And then I was like, oh, okay. And then later, another guy came and he came to give £20, and like over 3 or 4 days, people would just give me money, and I thought, I don't know how to take this. Yeah. I'll take the money, but I don't know how to take it.
That is a high form of acceptance right there, isn't it? Not only do we like it, but please take our money as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and that threw me off as well, because it was like people were coming and they were like talking about how they need the brighter artworks compared to, like, you know, the more political artworks that exist now, and, you know, time for change, and, you know, that those were the conversations, and the people were like, oh, we've got elephants in our zoo as well, and, you know, so I didn't know what to make of it, and still don't, but I still feel, I don't know, I think people I kind of appreciate it. Again, elephants is quite generically accepted. I don't know.
Can you do you ever, I suppose this whole last year with everything that's been going on with the pandemic and everything, it's been quite a time of reflection. I mean, have you had time to stop and just reflect on, you know, like where you started and where you are now? And, you know, can you, if you were kind of speaking to yourself back then, could you say, like, this is where you're going to be in 30 years time? Would you have believed it at the time?
Ooh. I think what happened what I did during lockdown was I've had all these hard copy photographs from 1989, 1990, just these 2 bags of hard copy photographs, and coincidentally just before lockdown I went to bought me a little home scanner. So for 2 weeks or so I was just scanning photographs every day and looking back, and the first thing that I realized was that I actually painted quite a lot of shit. A lot of, I don't know how people gave me credibility for half the shit that was painted. I was like,
not feeling it.
It's not feeling it, which I suppose it's a sign of growth. You know, you can't knock that. You know, but then I came across photographs of old friends of mine, and you know, guys that started in the crew with me that obviously gone their own ways and became family men before I did, and so on, you know. So one thing I did reflect on was I wasted a lot of time in painting shit and more importantly, realizing other people's artistic ideas come true. And when I say that, I mean, like, someone would phone and say, here's some money, I've got a coffee shop, I need it to look like this, can you do this, you know? that I feel was important to find myself now, but it was quite a big waste of resources. I mean, ideally, any artist would only want to paint what they would want to paint, but unfortunately we cannot, because we need to buy masks and hand sanitizer with money that we don't have. But that for me was the biggest takeaway of my past, is that we that me as a colored artist in South Africa, I am of the first kind of going this direction. There wasn't people or artists a generation ahead of me that could kind of veer us or say yes or no to what we were doing. So the problem during lockdown that came about is that we are figuring it all out, and I'm figuring it all out, and I'm basically learning off the internet all the time for what to do and what not to do. And unfortunately, having a year to yourself, laying on the couch and overthinking is not good.
No.
But I kind of managed that a bit and just shut down. But I definitely feel that we as an art movement could have been further if from the beginning we had a bit of a guiding hand. If we had, in the 80s already, people were able to come over and say, hey, in New York, we do it like this, and this is the approach. And if a gallery approaches you, don't tell them it's okay, they can keep all the money, you just want the exposure. We didn't know any better. That's what we were doing. That's what we were doing.
Do you feel then, do some of those coming up now, in South Africa, some of the artists there, do they kind of look to you, or are you able to, connect, whether it's via social media or whatever, even just to kind of maybe, give guidance or whatever, or is that, or just people just doing their own thing and it's like
I'm going to say A and C to what you were asking. A, I don't think people really look to me anymore, because there's genuinely so much more out there that can be looked at, and that's for you.
That is 1 second. Oh man, can you give me just 2 minutes? It's my home shop.
It's cool. Yeah, cool. Go get it.
Oh man, sorry. I'm back.
Yeah, you can't keep the delivery waiting.
Honestly. Okay. So to backtrack, so the question was, about, do people, do you find that those coming up in the scene there kind of look up to you, or are they, or seek guidance from you, or are they kind of just doing their own thing now?
Yeah, the funny thing with the guidance thing is, and I get a lot of. It's questions on what's the right direction, and the problem I have with it is that I can't really give advice, because I came up at a different time. The tools they have are not the tools that I have, and my approach is not necessarily what's best for them. Advice is not a blanket. It doesn't apply to everybody. Mm-hmm. It's not over. Advice doesn't. One piece of advice doesn't apply to everybody. So, I mean, I've noticed before that I've given people advice, and they've tried it, but it didn't work, because the advice could be just the seed, and what they do with it is obviously relative to who they are, and that needs to be understood. And that's a problem in itself, because if you're young and an upcoming artist, you don't know who you are, even when you're young or middle age, or even when you get older, you just don't know who you are. So, telling somebody as advice is, you need to find out who you are first before you find out what direction you want to go with your art. It's very, very hard, and it's abstract. which they don't want. They're looking for, this is what you want to do, A, B, and C, you know, which I can't give because, like I said earlier, backtracking a bit, is that I'm the first generation of my race doing this. And I myself am looking for advice all the time. I feel like I'm at the bottom of the food chain in the art scene here in our country because, you know, contemporary arts and so on take precedent as regarding value, you know. So my objective is to, you know, try and give it a bit of oomph. So the guidance thing is a bit difficult. I mean, I don't really care if people look up to me or not. It's nice, you know, when you get a bit of a pat on the back from a stranger who recognize you from 10 years ago. When I was thinner. And I'm like, how do you recognize me? He said, no, you still look the same. But it's always nice, and it's always, you know, even on the comments on social media, but people are like, oh, I used to look at your work when I was younger, and you know, you like that, it makes you feel good. It's a pleasantry more than anything else, you know. But at the end of the day, I think with such a open door to access to almost anybody in the world, people are looking more to international figures. You know, what they do with that information, what they do with that inspiration, that's questionable. That's very questionable. But I mean, again, when I started, I looked into international artists first before I looked to local artists. But because there weren't any, but you know, I looked to international artists first. But I think each to his own, man. You must just find who you are and go with it. And if it involves me or not, it doesn't really be any significance.
And so, in terms of, do you see, you know, that as a bit of a mission, kind of looking ahead now in terms of, like, you know, like continuing to grow the scene there and to, you know, to, so that it's even more accepted? Or, you know, do you see, I mean, you've traveled, what, London, Ireland, I think you've been to India as well, you know, you've done a lot of, you know, you've kind of put your works out there in the world, literally. So do you, where do you kind of see it going?
Well, what happened was, in me starting late 80s through the 90s, my objective, besides me trying to become graffiti famous, was to grow the scene. And we did that. But in the early 2000s, the city where I stayed, the city of Cape Town, they came in and they killed it. They brought in graffiti, Biolo Graffiti Squad, and they basically killed off a whole generation of artworks and potentially good artists, because you could get permission to still paint, but it was such a process. It wasn't worth it. I mean, a kid of the street is not going to fill out forms and, you know, submit designs and get neighbors' approval, and it was just so complicated that the whole thing fell away, and it basically killed off any interest in any form of, you know, getting into graffiti or whatever the case. A few hung around who were still doing like the illegal stuff because, you know, you got it, you know, that's an important part of the scene as well. So that kind of kept the flame alive, but even that's busy, you know, disappearing now because that generation's getting older. At this point in my life, I mean, I'm physically, I don't think I can kind of keep up with too many missions in life, you know. So trying to help a scene and build a scene, I would love to, but at the moment I've got 3 kids and yeah, things like, you know, charity begins at home, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. You've got you do have an immediate kind of big project that I'm kind of keeping you from at the minute. Was this site specific work that you were saying you're working on? It seems to be growing by the second as well. What's happening there?
I looked at some of my artworks in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and I saw that I was doing site specific works. So again, during lockdown, while I was looking at all these works, I realized that I've left some nuggets for myself in the past. I'm Marty McFly myself, and now and now I'm here realizing that that is what I was actually, the ideas were all left in, and I'm now just taking it and I'm kind of re-energizing it. And I have to say it, but I'm good at it, the site-specific stuff. So I am not going to look a gifted horse in the mouth. That is what's happening. I'm not looking a gifted horse in the mouth by not pursuing it. So my plan is for the next 6 months, possibly a year, depending on opportunities. Just push the elephants to the side, and just get the site-specific stuff out of my system, because it's bothering me. It's really eating at me. And that is what's happening now. It's me kind of just letting off, and when it's time, the elephants will be brought back, because again, that's just as important. It's the most important thing to me. But you need also, like most artists, you need to take a break from whatever you're doing and just let it simmer. But then I hope to, when I go back to the elephants, that I'll have a new approach to it, a new way of coloring it in, or simplifying it a bit, or using it in a different space. Leave it so that can organically become something else, and not hammer it, that it becomes so monotonous that the world stops paying attention. So the site-specific stuff is what I like, is because it's everything and anything. I'm not limited to making it a tusk or a trunk, or
Well, was that really cool? I was just going to say, there was that really cool one you posted just in the last couple of days. I think is it a swan, but with the bin bag as the body, which is just like so different to anything I've ever seen.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So that is what's happening. Because even while I was painting, only concentrating on the elephants, I would come in a situation and I'd see an element, and I'd be like, you know what that is? And then I think to myself, fuck it, let's paint an elephant. But now I'm embracing it, and even the thing I'm gonna be doing now, I'm so nervous about it, because if it works out, it's gonna work out properly. And I did post a Photoshop version of it during lockdown, because I thought I'd never have an opportunity to do it. But now that lockdown's ended, I contacted the building owners, and they were like, let's do it. And I'm going to delete the Photoshop version before I post the real one. Right. And so the site-specific, object inclusive thing, it's endless. It's endless. If you find the right little abandoned building, or even a school in like the poorer areas, a school couldn't ordinarily afford to pay me. All you got to do is negotiate with the principal and say, how about I come here for the next year, and I won't charge you, but you just got to let me do what I want to do. There'll be no sexism or racism or any political. It's not advert. It's just art for art's sake. Will it be a fair trade? And more often than not, I get a yes, and that becomes my studio. And everybody wins at the end of the day.
Must be such a. It feels. It sounds to me, listening to that, it sounds very satisfying. To be able to do that, really.
Yeah, it's trying to work smart, I think is the term, because imagine getting access to a whole school or a whole building, and again, there are people out there on Instagram. You see they've been painting the same building for 2-3 years, and you can see it's the same building because the aesthetic of it is all the same. But they again found their space, comfortable in it. For me here as well, safety is important, and making that your studio, and making that the most interesting space. And I think that is where I'm at. But at the same time, being able just to be free, and yeah, free sounds a bit cheesy. Just to embrace it. Yes, I think that's important.
Well, I really can't wait to see, to see this piece when it's no pressure.
It's genuinely been a year in the making, a 1 full year, and it was supposed to happen last year, but then lockdown kicked in, and that's how it fell away, and they were going to pay me to do it, but now they can't, because obviously they don't have the funds anymore. But again, the value of me doing it is way more important than getting paid for it, because I mean, if you really, I don't know what to say.
Well, I was just going to kind of interject there and just say that it seems like, obviously this is, there was the original project which may have been paid. We've had this whole year of lockdown and everything that's happened there. Now maybe it's not financially rewarding, but it's kind of almost like spiritually rewarding, if you like, being able to to do that.
Yes. So I think what will make it rewarding is when I post the final product, and then I put my phone on vibrate, and I turn on the like notifications on Instagram, and put the phone in my chest.
Shocker. It's all coming out now.
and just accept the world. Every vibration will send happy vibes.
Yeah, the warming embrace of the like notification. Yes. Don't put the sound on as well. That'll be the end of it.
Yeah, it's like sitting in a jacuzzi, just that vibration.
Now there's the new product. Someone's going to come up with that now, aren't they? Yes, that's the next thing. You only get bubbles if you get enough likes.
Copyright 2021.
That's it. Falko One Incorporated. We'll wrap it up here. But I've really enjoyed speaking to you. I just think, at the risk of giving you a non-social media, I think your work it's actually genius, because I think the way that you can just pick a spot, adapt, put something there that people just love straight away and kind of react to and enjoy. I just think it's a wonderful thing. It's a really wonderful thing, and the fact that you've essentially helped to really create a scene there, and now that's been accepted really worldwide. I think it's just fantastic, and I really look forward to seeing what comes next. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I actually would like to give a shout out, and I'm not going to mention any name just in case I forget somebody, but to all the street artists out there who are doing site-specific stuff and the object-inclusive stuff. There's like a little catalog of artists who are quite noteworthy. I'd like to give a shout out to all of them, because as simple as the end product might seem, it's really not easy, and I really appreciate what they're doing, because at the end of the day, I do look at their work and I do admire it, and I'm always, giving it a bit of a like. But perhaps one day we shall all meet and make a mega site-specific artwork.
Yes. Amen to that. Yeah. Amen to that. Well, thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for the reach out, and we'll see each other on the other side.
Definitely.